and welcome to my Christmas reading nook. Last year for the whole of Christmas week I sat here and read books, so it is a very comfy place to sit. I have next to the camera is today's advent candle, which technically should have been yesterday's advent candle, so the third I accidentally opened the fourth and then I opened the third on my chocolate one. I was very confused yesterday. So someone in the family, I think it was my mum, kindly swapped the third to the fourth on my candle advent calendar, and so it came with an orange candle, which I think is kind of like a summer fruity punchy thing, and it also came with a packet of Haribos. And then I opened the fourth on the chocolate advent calendar, and that had a dairy milk caramel in it, which I gave to my mum because I'm not a massive fan of those ones. But today I'm going to sit and read A Christmas Carol because I have never read it. I've watched many of the adaptations, one of my favourites being The Man Who Invented Christmas, but I've never actually read the book. So I'm going to sit and read it and you're going to get my first-hand reaction, and I'll tell you what I think of it as well at the end. I've got some snacks of some shortbread, obviously the Haribo from my advent calendar, a cup of tea, but if you're wanting to sit and read then you can have whatever drink you want. Hot chocolate seems to be perfectly fitting for Christmas if you wanted that. I've got a Christmas blanket. Let's sit down and get started. So, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Stave 1. Marley's Ghost. Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was dead as a doornail. Mind, I don't mean to say that I know, of all my knowledge, what there is particularly dead about a doornail. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double locked, as he had locked it with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. He tried to say humbug, but stopped at the first syllable, and being from the emotion he had undergone, or the fatigues of the day, or the glimpse of the invisible world, or the dull conversation of the ghost, or the lateness of the hour, much in need of repose, he went straight to bed, without undressing, and fell asleep upon the instant. And that is the end of Stave 1. So far, my thoughts, it's a very easy read. And secondly, Marley talks about how the ghosts will visit him over 3 different nights. I was always under the impression that it happened over one night, so I'll be interested to see how the rest of it, the book, plays out, because I was always under the impression that it all happened in one night and he woke up on Christmas morning. Let's continue. Stave 2. The First of the Three Spirits. When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that looking out the bed he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. He was endeavouring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes, and when the chimes of a neighbouring church struck the 4 quarters, so he listened for the hour. To his great astonishment, the heavy bell went on from 6 to 7 and from 7 to 8, and though Scrooge pressed it down with all his force, he could not hide the light which steamed from under it in an unbroken flood upon the ground. He was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further of being in his own bedroom. He gave the cap a parting squeeze in which his hand relaxed, and had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. That was the end of Stave 2, and nothing massively new from what I know from watching film adaptations of the book, but it's interesting to read and see where Scrooge has come from and how over the years that has affected him in time. On to Stave 3. Stave 3, the second of the three spirits. Awaking in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore, and sitting up in bed to get his thoughts together, Scrooge had no occasion to be told that the bell was again upon the stroke of 1. He felt that he was restored to consciousness in the right nick of time, for the especial purpose of holding a conference with the second messenger dispatched to him through Jacob Marley's intervention. "Have they no refuge or resource?" cried Scrooge. "Are there no prisons?" said the spirit, turning on him for the last time with his own words. "Are there no workhouses?" The bell struck 12. Scrooge looked about him for the ghost, and saw it not. As the last stroke ceased to vibrate, he remembered the predictions of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes, beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him. Well, that is the end of Stave 3. Interesting. there was a bit that I'd never seen before, I will say, in any of the film adaptations. And the ghost ends up taking him on a ship or something. I didn't fully understand why, and I think that's why it may have never been in a video adaptation before. On to day 4. So I've had a snack, replenished my tea, charged the battery on my phone because it died, and we've got 2 staves to go. On to stave 4, the last of the spirits. The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came near him, Scrooge bent down upon his knee, for in the very air through which this spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and misery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible save one outstretched hand. In his agony he caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him. Holding up his hand in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Well, stave 4. A little bit of a sad one. No, it's for those that haven't read The Christmas Carol or seen it. Well, it's the future and of what may be. But I'm optimistic about the last stave. Onwards to stave 5. So, stave 5, the end of it. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in. I will live in the past, the present, and the future, Scrooge repeated as he scrambled out of bed. The spirits of all 3 shall strive within me. O Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this. Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good, at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset. And, knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes in grins, as have the malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle, and ever afterwards. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed knowledge. May that be truly said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. The end. That was my first time reading A Christmas Carol. I really enjoyed it. If you've never read it before, I recommend that you do. It's a very short book, as you can see. I read it in an afternoon. It's only got 5, it's called staves, but essentially it's only got 5 chapters. And I think we got this version, my mum bought this version for about £4-5 on Amazon. So it's not really that expensive. You can probably get it for free on Kindle because it is old. But because it's so old, I never considered reading it. I always thought it would be a really difficult read and a really long book. But it's not, it's a fairly easy read, and it's, as I said, it's a really short book with only 5 chapters. So if you haven't read it before, I do recommend. If you have read it before, let me know in the comments what you thought of it. If you haven't read it before, then let me know in the comments if you're going to read it, now that I've told you a little bit of how I found reading it. And I will see you for tomorrow's video.